Dear guests, it is a great honor to be here and to open this conference that we strongly believe is one of the most important elements of our lasting campaign against establishment and rise of the European empire. It is 1 year, nearly 1 year now, after the European Parliament has adopted 267 amendments to the European treaties in November 2023. 1 month later, the Commission has accepted the resolution. So, for the first time, after the Lisbon Treaty, the official proceeding of amending European treaties is commenced. Just imagine the situation in the United States. If the Congress and Senate accept 267 amendments to your Constitution, and nobody cares, nobody discusses it, media are silent, politicians do not mention that something is happening, and you are just one step before all the powers of the states are transferred to the swamp. It is just the situation now in Europe. It is not only about the general politics. What the Brussels is trying to grip is external security, internal security, military spending, and I say it in Poland, which spends 5% of its GDP for military and does not spend it in Europe, but in our allies, with our allies in the world. The foreign affairs, all competences concerning foreign affairs, bilateral relations, multilateral relations with countries outside of EU will be transferred as a competence to Brussels. Border protection. There will be no national borders, no external national borders, only the European Union border under the supervisory and decisions of Brussels. Industry and economy. All the regulations decided in Brussels. Monetary policy, climate policy, whatever it means, cross-border infrastructure, airports, highways, education and upbringing of children, health and family issues. And under health, European Union, of course, understands everything that comes with it, together with so-called sexual and reproductive rights. And under family issues, Guy Verhofstadt Commission prepared those amendments having in mind all the regulations concerning family, marriage, surrogacy, etc. It is 2 years from now that those amendments will be probably enacted if there is not a single state, European state, that will oppose that. Our mission as think tanks, analytical centers, is to provide the people with information, is to make it impossible to follow the lines and strategies well known in Europe of reforming the European Union without any democratic control. Our mission is to open the public debate, inform the people, and try to counterbalance this strategic attack on sovereignty of our countries and independence of our states. And as we are just in the middle of what seems to be the most turbulent US presidential campaigns in the modern history, we have to understand that the outcome of that will have a strategic significance, not only for international security, but on the stability of the North Atlantic Alliance, on protection of our borders, on modernization of international refugee system, in order to respond what we all experience, these weapons of mass migration attacking the borders both of the United States and Europe. Finally, it is transatlantic cooperation that 100 years ago provided crucial support for Polish independence. And again, it is that alliance that will have a key role in securing freedom, sovereignty, and democracy of European nations against the threats of European empire. And European empire is declared by the authors of the documents as a competitor and counterbalance to North Atlantic Treaty. That has been already announced. Thank you very much for joining this conference. And we tend not to call it a conference so often, rather a seminary. It will start with the panels, the open panels. We will discuss different issues and different aspects of the reform of European Union. And after those panels, we have a closed debate, closed workshop under the Chatham House rules, just the idea of which has been born a few months ago during the visit of James Carafano in Warsaw, to enable our friends from the United States and our allies in the European Union to provide full information on the meaning of this reform of European Union, on an impact of this reform of European Union on transatlantic relations. Thank you very much, James, for being with us. James Carafano and the Heritage Foundation co-organizes this conference, and without your assistance, your help, it won't be possible. And I would like just to mention all the organizations and all the think tanks and centers, analytical centers that joined us today. Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, Institute of Right-Wing Politics, MCC Brussels, Warsaw Institute, Center for Fundamental Rights, Ladisław Hanus Institute, Machiavelli Center for Political and Strategic Studies, EU-US Forum, Solidarity Center for Law and Justice, Disensa Foundation, Identity and Democracy Foundation, Vigilare Foundation, Ordo Iuris Croatia as well, Nazione Futura. Thank you very much for being with us also, representatives of Romanian Parliament and Foreign Affairs Committee, and the media, the Telegraph, and of course, European Conservative. It's a great honor to open this conference, and James, the floor is yours.
Well, I bring you greetings from the swamp. I have, and many American conservatives have always believed that the real bridge of the 21st century of the transatlantic community is conservatives. That the idea that elites can have absolute governance and tell us how to live our lives in the pursuit of freedom and prosperity and security is as great a danger, if not a greater danger, than the external threats which have come after this community for centuries. I want to thank the organizers who put this together today. It's a great honor. It's important for us. The very selfish goal that we have as American conservatives simply need to understand more about the process that is going on here in Europe. And so we understand how we can partner to help strengthen and support the voices who believe in popular sovereignty. If you look in America today, you see a lot of stress and a lot of competition, but it is because our system is designed to prevent the consolidation of political power, that today America has the most extraordinary election in the free world. Over 300 million people. I know that's like a suburb in Delhi, I get that. But over 300 million people have this absolute choice between two visions and two different paths forward. I think for American voters, that is the most exciting and tremendous gift to have a real choice in what your future looks like. And we'll see what happens in the American election. But regardless, I believe that the common cause and the bonds between American conservatives and European conservatives are only going to grow and strengthen all the time. I tell many of my American friends is, when you look outside your community, you have way more in common with our friends in Poland, in Hungary, in Italy, than you do with the yahoos in California and New York. So as a New York kid, the one thing they always taught us is find out where your friends are and be with your friends. So I am really looking forward to learning from this conference and from the workshop. I am so thankful to so many of the organizations that agree to participate here because, I travel a lot around the world. Increasingly, wherever I go, I see all my friends. And it says nothing about me, but it says a lot about the yearning and the desire of people that truly believe in freedom getting together to fight in this common cause. So thank you for your participation. Thank you for organizing, and I look really forward to the program and to the workshop to learn more about the future of Europe and the pursuit of freedom and prosperity and security. So thank you so much.
I would like to invite the members of the first panel that will be moderated by Ellie Kreger-Fontini from the European Conservative, and then Joe Grogan, former director of the United States Domestic Policy Council and assistant to President Donald Trump, Liliana Śmiech, chairwoman of the foundation, Krzysztof Muława, member of the Parliament on Poland, recommended by Warsaw Institute. Thank you very much for being with us. Rafael Odor, Director of Identity and Democracy Foundation, and Ricardo Ruiz de la Serna, Attorney, Head of Studies and Training at the Dicenso Foundation in Spain.
I think I'll start here and see how it goes. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ellen Fantini. I'm the online editor of the European Conservative, and I love what was just said about this transatlantic communication between and amongst conservatives. The European Conservative is an online news portal, journal. We publish news every day, analysis, commentary. We also have a quarterly magazine. And one of our missions is to explain Europe to Americans, as well as explaining Europe to Europeans. And what I mean by that is Europeans often only read the media in their own language about their own country, and it's really important to know what's going on across the continent, and also, of course, to know what's going on around the world. This panel, the US and EU climate and regulatory policies and transatlantic competitiveness in the global economy. That's quite a lot to talk about in a short period. My opening remarks will simply set the stage, I hope. So green policy and competitiveness are on everyone's minds, or certainly on the tips of everyone's tongues. But what does this mean in practical terms? Well, certainly competitiveness is the buzzword in Brussels these days. From the recent Draghi report and, of course, the unelected Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, they're all talking about competitiveness. At the same time, you see a subtle change, but we should not be fooled. In the last session in Brussels, we heard a lot about the Green Deal. And now we're hearing a lot about the clean deal. This is simply a language trick. Nothing's changed. It's all the same ideology, from food and farmers, from this ideology of let them eat bugs, let them freeze all winter, rather than how can we help farmers grow our food, and how can we encourage energy independence? So this ideology is rampant on both sides of the Atlantic. Terrible ideas from green activists are being imported and exported from both sides, and of course, with centralized and coordinated control and the collusion of big business. So our speakers will touch on the idea that the modern environmental movement is both a false religion and is financed and pushed by big business. Of course, they're scaring the young people. Many young people believe that the planet's days are coming to an end. And politicians and bureaucrats, along with big business, help to encourage that fear. The most important thing for us is to maintain national sovereignty on these issues. Our speakers will talk about frightening and quite frankly, chilling treaty change plans that will further centralize power in Brussels and away from the sovereign nations of Europe. I highly recommend the Ordo Iuris report on this proposed treaty change. It covers many, many topics, including climate change. I could just stand here and read it, and then we could all have lunch. But instead, I'll let our esteemed speakers tell you a bit more. So on the panel, we have to the furthest right, and I'm not sure if that's ideologically or simply just seating, we have Joe Grogan, former director of the U.S. Domestic Policy Council. He has extensive experience in healthcare and regulatory reform. Then we have Raphael Audouard, who is the director of the Identity and Democracy Foundation. And he specializes in European political affairs. Then we have Ricardo Ruiz de la Serna. He's the head of studies for the Descenso Foundation in Madrid with a background in international law and human rights. And then we have Krzysztof Milała, who is a member of the Polish Parliament and vice chairman of the Committee on Energy, Climate, and National Assets. So I think we'll start with Mr. Grogan.
So thanks very much for having me. It's my first time to Poland, so this is a real treat for me. I know James is horrified by this, that I didn't get here sooner, and I share that. Beautiful city, and I've had a wonderful time since I arrived. And I want to thank the conference organizers for putting this together. So I just want to frame this a little bit with a little bit of data, because the left has grown to really despise data in these debates, which is one of the reasons why, if you question climate policy orthodoxy, they'll call it hate speech and try and censor it. But in 2008, the US economy and the European economy was roughly equal, and now the US economy is 80% larger. And does anybody think that's because there isn't enough bureaucracy in Europe, there isn't enough uniform thinking, that Europe hasn't put enough faith in Brussels to solve problems? Fundamentally, this is about what type of culture you have and who you have faith in. And unfortunately, too many people have come to the conclusion that there aren't enough technocrats and experts in charge, and that and this is true in the United States as well, that we need to emulate the central planning models from China. And it's never going to work in the United States, and it's not going to work in Europe. We have to have faith ultimately in human creative energy, the ability to innovate, the ability for entrepreneurs to move forward for themselves, for their families, and for their cultures. And frankly, too, we have to have healthy competition among member states as we do in the United States. Now, Italy's GDP now is roughly comparable to Mississippi, which is the poorest state in the United States. France falls between Idaho and Arkansas, which are near the bottom as well. This is sort of remarkable when you think about how much creative energy these cultures have given Western civilization over the years, not just in art, but in commercial enterprise as well. And if you look at the environmental policy specifically, I just want to contrast a little bit with Donald Trump's policies, because he came in and was unabashed about saying part of our strategic goal is going to be U.S. energy dominance. As a result of that, U.S. oil production went up 38%, natural gas exports went up 5-fold, and greenhouse gases declined. Greenhouse gases, when Donald Trump left office, were at 1963 levels in the United States. In 2019, they were reduced 10%. Now, the left doesn't want to talk about that because they're not interested in quantifying the reductions. They're not interested in talking about the data because it is a religion. It is superstition that the quote-unquote Green Deal or Clean Deal or whatever it is going to improve the human condition. And when you look at how this has sort of evolved, and one of the most interesting developments in the United States over the last, I mean, it's been a fascinating election on a number of different levels. But one thing that's interesting for me to watch is this sort of strange bedfellows union between Bobby Kennedy Jr., the nephew of the former U.S. president from Democratic president, John F. Kennedy, and son of Robert F. Kennedy, who probably would have won and been president had he not been assassinated, aligning himself with Donald Trump. And a key reason for this, in his own words, is environmental policy. Now, he made his career on environmental policy. If you listen to him describe it, what why that is, it's essentially because the left and large corporations have taken humanity out of environmental policy. And specifically, they've taken the divine out of environmental policy. Meaning, and he's very eloquent about this, you know, all the great spiritual leaders at some point, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, spent time in nature. And if you look at the progression of art in the West, you see beautiful landscapes in the U.S. Hudson River School, and you see, and at one point, there was tremendous art of American pastoral and, you know, the American West, the Canadians as well. They had an entire artistic movement based upon this. But there are human beings in those paintings, more often than not. And now we've come up with this theory that human beings are some type of viral infestation and need to be subjugated for some larger purpose. And we need to quantify these numbers. It's no secret that the reason why the Green New Deal has gained such a push in the United States and why the totally misnamed Inflation Reduction Act was able to pass is because there was money involved. So big business was able to sell a quantifiable economic gain. They were able to put numbers on this legislative achievement. And that is a key, that's the alliance that we need to watch out for in Europe and the United States. When they quantify the climate with nonsensical, theoretical numbers moving forward as far as what it might do to the planet's temperature, which is all nonsense, by the way. None of these bills, none of these policies are lowering the planet's temperature, even if you buy into the idea that we need to work towards that goal somehow. None of it is reducing the planet's temperature. But what the numbers are real on is the reduction in gross domestic product in the nations that adopt these policies and the transfer of wealth from the working class, from the middle class, to large corporations. So what I would just, in summation, I'd just say, look, if we want to get back to common sense environmental policy, one, we have to be followed by measures of economic prosperity that relate to real, everyday human beings, not put faith in large corporations in league with faceless bureaucrats who pretend that they have everybody's best interest at heart. And some of them actually believe it. I will say that. Some of them actually believe their ideology and think they are improving the planet somehow, even though the data is clearly at odds with what's occurring in Europe. But ultimately, is Europe going to continue to fall behind on economic prosperity numbers? It is not good for the United States if in a few years we're double the size of the European economy. It's not going to be good for the United States when we're 4 times the size of the European economy. Eventually, Europe is going to be nothing more than Disneyland for wealthy Americans and wealthy Chinese to come and vacation. And we need a strong European governance system and a strong series of European economies in competition and in partnership with the United States so that we both grow both strategically and economically more and more intertwined moving forward.
Thank you very much. Why don't we move right to Raphael, and we'll just come down the line with the remarks.
So, hello everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the Ordo Iuris Institute and the Heritage Foundation for the invitation. I think that it's very important to bring together national conservative and patriots in all the Western world to work together. Climate regulations policies are not the work just of few green activists or left-wing extremists in universities. These policies are being pushed by the highest European authorities. The European Union, and in particular the European Commission, see themselves as champions of the fight against climate change. Ursula von der Leyen told the European Parliament that this issue was one of the most important in Europe, as paired with the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine. I'm not sure that the COVID-19 comparison is the best way to prove how dangerous climate change is, but never mind. The European Union stands for a series of objectives. We will have the occasion to speak about their different goals, their different objectives, but I just will speak about some of them. They want to achieve a climate neutrality by 2050 and reduce greenhouse emissions. They want to increase the share of renewable green energy in the energy mix, and most notably, they want to ban non-electric cars by 2035, so it's very near this moment. In the same time, they also want to increase organic farming, reduce fertilizer use, and reduce the surface of land used by agriculture. So it will lead to a catastrophe in terms of agriculture. So we will have the occasion during this panel to speak about the consequences of these policies, how it will destroy our economy, our industry, or it will be very damageful for businesses, and in particular small businesses, or it will be damageful for common people, for their consumption, for their money and things like that. But I want to emphasize on one thing, which is how this green policies, this Green New Deal, is very dangerous for European sovereignty and for the sovereignty of our different nation states. Because one goal of the European bureaucrats is to transfer the power, the law, the power from the states to the European Union, and to get rid of the veto power of the different nation states. And one way to do that is a green policy. In the new treaty they want to create climate change, green policy will be the prerogative of the European Union. At first look, it could be seen as common sense, because economy and family are national issues, but climate change, green policy are concerning every European. So we can understand why this policy could be done by the European Union. But of course, there is a trick. That is the green policy, this Green New Deal concerns every aspect of our economy, of our lives. It's of course concern industry, agriculture, housing, transport, something like that, but it also concerns very personal part of our lives, like health or family, because if you see what they want to do, what the green activists say, for example, that having children is bad for environment. So if you let the European Union, if you let these bureaucrats to having all power about green policy, in the end of the day, they will have power about family, about, for example, meat consumption. For them, consuming meat is bad for the weather, for the climate. So tomorrow they could say, okay, we have to reduce number of children, we have to reduce meat consumption in order to fight against climate change. So giving the European Union the power about green policy is giving them power about every aspect of our lives. And of course, it also gives them the power around economy and budget, because this climate change policies, these green deals, are not just a few laws, they are really a green revolution, comparable to the industrial revolution. And in order to do a revolution, you need lots of money. And what they need to do this Green Deal is 1,000 billion euro in 10 years. 1,000 billion euro in 10 years. And this money comes from the states, of course. So 25% of the budget of the European Union would be used for this Green New Deal. And they will also need hundreds of billions of money for taxpayers. So it will lead to an increase of public debt. Some economic experts say that in order to finance the Green Deal, we will need to increase public debt by 300 billion euros in 10 years. So, and of course, it will also lead to an increase of tax money. So, giving the European Union this power about climate change policies, also giving them power about our economy, about debt, about taxation, and things like that. And in the end, it's also giving them the power about technological and technological progress. So if we summarize it, if the nation states accept this idea that the European Union have power about climate change and the Green New Deal, it will give them power around every aspect of the European citizens' lives. It will give them power about technological progress, and it will give them power about budget and debt. So in the end of the day, they will control everything, and Green New Deal is a kind of Trojan horse in order to give the power of the nation states to the European Union. And that's the reason why they are defending this. It's not sheer altruism. Maybe for some left activists or green activists, they do that because they really think that it will help the planet. But for the bureaucrats of Brussels or Washington, for the liberals, it's a way to reinforce their power on every aspect of the citizen's life. So in the end of the day, green policy is both a means and an end for technocrats in Brussels and Washington. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ricardo.
Okay. Good morning. My first words have to be to thank Ordo Iuris for this excellent organization, for the generosity in this invitation to Fundación Disenso, and also to the Heritage Foundation, who's always a loyal ally and a stronghold of liberty and reason in a time where those words are having a sort of green color in the European Union. I'm not an expert in economy, but I'm the head of studies of a foundation with very good economists in its environment. So let me share with you some basic bullet points regarding the economic consequences for Spain and probably for some other European countries or countries in the European Union. And finally, I will sum up with a couple of reflections on what's happening in Europe from the point of view of economy and the conservative values. Probably the first consequence I would like to remark, and some of them have already been mentioned, is that the climate policies in the European Union are imposing terrible burdens on ordinary people, and especially on ordinary entrepreneurs. For instance, people working in the countryside, producing food, growing food, vegetables, fruits. I don't need to elaborate on the kind of superpower Spain is in this field. Spain is able to produce food to feed its own population and to export with the highest quality under, I would say, every circumstance. But the terrible burden that the climate policies coming from the European Union are imposing, not just taxes, but also the conditions to produce, are, on one hand, making many small entrepreneurs to close their business, which means losing jobs. And second, it's opening the gate to imports from third countries, countries with lower standards of quality, for instance, in the case of the use of pesticides, with lower standards in safety regulations, with lower standards in rights for the workers. So it's not true that this is for the benefit of ordinary people. It's exactly the opposite. It is harming ordinary people. It is harming people working in the countryside. I've already mentioned another consequence, which is the loss of jobs. There is something that we might think when dealing with climate policy, which is not just the consequences for the companies, but also the consequences in the salaries, for instance. It's very difficult to pay a decent salary in the European Union today because of this kind of regulations. I'm not going to elaborate. I fully agree with what has been said about the open war against reason that is being waged in the European Union against science, against, I would say, against moderation. The sort of radical policies that we are suffering in the European Union are having devastating consequences, not just for the companies, but also for labor. The use of prohibited pesticides brings me to something that I think is relevant, and normally we don't think about it. The European Union has tried to improve the standards of food. It's probably one of the very few places in the world where you can be sure that in case of a crisis, you will have supply of food, of good quality food, safe food guaranteed. But from the very same moment that we're opening the gate, we're opening the door to imports from third countries without these standards, we're running the kind of risk that certainly the European citizens do not want to run, sorry. Let's talk about energy. In Germany, in Spain, of course, you know that in Spain we are suffering the consequences of a socialist government. I don't need to elaborate in Poland, I don't need to elaborate what it means. Poland suffered socialism and communism for a very long time. I'm going to come back to this in a moment. The closing of nuclear plants is saying something not just about energy policy, but also about the prices of energy and the consequences in businesses. Other countries are enjoying cheap energy, lower regulations, lower standards. And that's one of the reasons why the European Union has stopped being competitive. There is another consequence, which is the offshoring of European, for instance, Spanish, but also from other European countries, the offshoring of companies to third countries with lower standards. And it's not that these companies are being, let's say, disloyal to the European citizens. It's that otherwise they won't be able to compete. I'm very happy to be back in Warsaw because this is exactly the kind of city where we should have this kind of seminar to think on the future of the European Union and the reform of the European Union treaties. Because it is in this city where the spirit of Europe and the spirit of our civilization was saved, not once, not twice, but 3 times. The first one, the freedom of Europe, was saved by the Poles in 1920, in the miracle of the Vistula. The second time, it was the dignity of Europe that was saved in the defense of the city in 1939. And the third time was 80 years ago, in 1944, when the Poles rose up against the Nazis. A couple of days ago, 85 years ago, on the 17th and 18th September 1939, Poland, which was already under attack by the Nazis, was also attacked by the Soviets, by the Soviet Union, and suffered 2 dark nights of communism. So this is exactly the place to think about the kind of economic model that is being tried to impose in Europe. And this is exactly the right place to think on the consequences in our civilization. We tend to think that economy is just about producing goods and services for the companies. But it's also having, and I'm so glad that Rafael mentioned that before, because that was one of the things I would like to remark. It's also about everything that we hold dear. Our food, our family, our traditions, our identity. The climate policies in the European Union are not just aimed at transforming our economy. They are aimed at transforming our societies, our nations, our civilizations. And they are against everything that a conservative should hold dear in their hearts. Reason. We are in a crusade against reason. Unfortunately, it's terrible to say, but we are in a crusade against reason in the European Union. I'm not going to elaborate on the numbers that have been just mentioned. We are in an open war against virtue, another of the basic fundamentals of free market. We're in an open war, we're suffering an open war on fair rules. Climate policies are breaking the principle of fair rules. You should apply the same rules to everyone competing in the market. Now we have qualified countries importing from a lower price with lower standards to the European Union. The notion of limited government is under heavy attack in the European Union today. In fact, the European Commission is expanding its powers. And climate policy is exactly the perfect alibi. Who would oppose to a strong power, central power, if we are under such a terrible danger and such a terrible threat? And finally, we talk a lot about a Green Deal in Europe, but a deal is an agreement. In Europe, there is no agreement at all. In Europe, it is imposed on the citizens. It is imposed on the nations. And very heavy fines and terrible consequences are to be faced if you don't accept that deal that, in fact, is an imposition. Am I so pessimistic as it sounds? No. We have a joke. I'm a teacher at the university, and we have a joke in my university. We tend to say, don't worry because the Poles will save the world. Today, I am renewing this hope. Thank you very much.
Ricardo, thank you for the historical input of the responsibility of Polish people. Thank you very much. Mr. Kwaśniewski, Ordo Iuris, Heritage Foundation, thank you very much for the invitation, for the organization of this meeting. I'm proud to take part in this meeting. First of all, let me say that my speech would be a little bit shorter because I expected some kind of discussion. But let's make it clear. We can't make an equation between Green Deal and competitiveness. This is everything in this short sentence. Everything else we can describe the process and the results of Green Deal and fatal politics of green agenda. So let me start from the point that European Union was created, was invented for different reasons. Initially, everybody, every European, every person who lives in Europe thought that it would be free trade, it would be easy to travel, there would be a transfer of goods, products, services, as well as capital. But right now, I would say that it is very much everything connected with Green Deal and Green Agenda. Let's take into account, as an example, ETS and CBAM mechanism, where they invented to make European Union countries and economics more competitive. Of course not. Those both mechanisms were invented to penalize industries, and in result, it was not to maintain environment. The result is that our economies are less competitive to each economy outside of European Union. We thought that our industries, European Union industry, taking into consideration a whole industry, would stand shoulder to shoulder to United States, China, India, any other fast-growing industries like Asian tigers. But in fact, what we received, we are losing unfortunately jobs. We are stagnating, and the future, as Ricardo said, is a little bit dark. This is obvious. Everybody knows that the European Union, by this Green Deal, does not take into consideration different speed of development, different energy mix, and different approaches, different details coming from industries and different things from different countries. Yes, look at this CBAM, so carbon admission border mechanism. Because of this mechanism, a lot of companies, corporates, bring these factories and move that factories outside of European Union, where I would say often the legislation and standards of environmental issues are far lower than in European Union. So in both ways, this CBAM mechanism does not make our industry more competitive, but also it is also a harm for environment as well. Okay, thank you very much.
Big thank you to all the speakers for those remarks. And my notes are overflowing because you've touched on so many important things. A few of the words that I wrote down, I think, are worth discussing a bit more. So Joe Grogan talking about how when we lose this healthy competition and big business gets involved, for Europe, this simply just becomes weakness. This idea of Europe becoming the Disneyland for rich Americans and Chinese is really a troubling picture of the European future, and I don't think it's wrong. I mean, I don't think that that the bureaucrats in Brussels want it any other way. And that brings me to what Raphael said about really the Green Deal, the Clean Deal, as it's now been refashioned, as a Trojan horse for power, right? So It's a trick. It's a trick. So when the bureaucrats use language of virtue and vice, you know, when they use this religious, almost religious language, but they flipped it around. So a virtue like industriousness becomes a vice. It becomes something bad. Industry is bad. Small business is bad. Trying to feed your family is bad. And the trick, I think, as Raphael pointed out, and I want us to discuss this, these kinds of regulations, both in Europe and in the United States, are meant to control every aspect of people's lives. So when they say, oh, this person's portfolio, this, for example, Spanish socialists' portfolio, is simply competitiveness and the environment. Don't be fooled. It's a trick, because it does affect every aspect of our lives. And then finally, these ideas of, you know, Brussels thinks everyone in Europe is just a member of the laptop class, right? Everyone can just open their laptop and work wherever they are. And they forget that ordinary people, the ordinary people who, frankly, voted for a massive change in Europe and didn't get it, the unelected European Commission and its president think everyone can just flip open their laptop and feed their families by typing on a keyboard, rather than growing food, operating machinery, building things, making things here in Europe to provide for Europeans. And the same thing is true in America. So I want to open the discussion to this question of power, and that the deal, which of course is no deal, because a deal requires that both parties say, yes, that's a good idea, let's shake on it. How it really is simply a power grab. And Christoph, can I start with you on this question of a power grab from the perspective of Poland? So what's happening in Brussels, how is that a power grab away from the Polish people?
Thank you for the question. So just just take into consideration that Polish industry still rely on coal. I don't think that it's wrong, but for the leaders of European Union, for whom the Green Deal is a religion, as you told, they just forget about that. They don't care about Polish industry, let's say the wealthy of common Polish person living not in Warsaw, earning some big money, because here we earn a lot more than in countryside. So what not only we as a people living in Warsaw are taking and listening from Brussels, is of course the same as people listening, I don't know, living in Siedlce, 100 kilometers from here. So let's small city. They earn a lot less than here in Warsaw, and they have to follow the same criteria. We are not ready to buy materials for, I don't know, 50,000 USD, 50,000 USD, 50,000 euro to make our houses built in a way that European leaders want to be made or to be updated by selected materials. This is not along our needs. This is not along our situation, financial situations. This is not along the energy mix, which still consists of, as I told you, coal. So, as I mentioned in the previous speech,
We can't make the equation that it's both competitive, this Green Deal, but also it make harm for common Polish people living not only in Warsaw, but every part of our country.
Listening to those remarks and thinking also about what Ricardo said, and then also thinking about American politics, you know, there's this phrase, flyover country. They say in America, these are the voters who are ignored by the elites, particularly on the coasts, right? The flyover country. You don't even stop there, you just keep flying from coast to coast. And when we think about Europe, every European country has its own flyover country, right? The people who are working and growing our food and building things are ignored. They simply flyover country. These are the farmers, these are the industries. So as we think about this power grab, Ricardo, do you think that this is really about ignoring the voices of the flyover country in Spain and elsewhere?
Let me put it this way. This is not just about ignoring ordinary people's voices. This is about paying attention only to the voices of the global elites, which is not exactly the same. You have described a social group that we might sum up as the technocrats, okay, sharing an interesting feature, which is that they are derooted. They are not connected to any place, which is a symbol of the laptop. You can open your laptop and work and change the world from wherever you are. This derooting is against our tradition, it's against our civilization. You would share a common set of values and a common set of notions that were rooted in a specific territory. Let me just give a short example. When the colonies rose up against the King George, fighting for some truths that they hold self-evident, that men were endowed with certain rights, among which it is right, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness. They found allies, they found people who fought alongside them, like Kosciuszko, or like Bernardo de Galvez, Spanish. That's the origin of Galveston, right? And they were sharing a common set of values. The words meant the same for all of them. They could understand notions like country, or like tyranny, or like freedom. This social group has deprived those words of its meaning and has created new words and new meanings, which is exactly what the communists did, by the way. And it's impossible to find a common ground when you are so absolutely derooted that you feel that you have nothing in common with your fellow citizens. And not just a country, I mean your country, but your city, but your province. And I think that's the reason why the problem in the European Union is not just economy, it's how economy is used as a tool to transform the deep roots of our civilization.
Thanks for that. Raphael, you are functioning in the bubble. That's the Brussels bubble, very similar to Washington D.C.'s swamp. So you're functioning in the bubble. What can the sovereigntist, conservative, patriotic politicians who've been elected by the people to represent their countries in the European Union, what can these political parties and groups do to fight back against this monster of an agenda, particularly when they're mostly behind the cordon sanitaire? And a reminder, the cordon sanitaire is, of course, a barrier to keep the healthy away from the sick, the infected, right? Those are the conservatives and patriots and sovereigntists. So what's the political solution in Brussels for parties that also have been shoved aside?
Of course, the situation is complicated in Brussels because there is this kind of weird majority between the so-called conservative of EPP. Of course, there is some people in EPP who are good conservative, but most of them are more and more liberal, and they are in alliance with the socialists and the liberals, and sometimes the Greens. So there is this coalition of liberal parties who act against the interest of the common people or national sovereignty. But what we see is that there is an increase of the conservatives and the patriots in the European Parliament, both in the Patriots for Europe group, ECR group, or ESN group, and some people in EPP too. So there is an increase of the conservative voice, of the patriotic voice, and it's more and more possible for these people to go to some kind of moderate conservative, to say, okay, are you really going to support this? Like I think the best tool, the best weapon we have against the liberals is their radicality, because it's a revolution. This movement is a green woke revolution, and as in every revolution, the revolution is children. Like we saw it in the French Revolution when some part, in the end of the day, Danton, Robespierre, they all have been killed by the revolutionaries. In the same in the Bolshevik Revolution, Trotsky have been killed by Stalin. So in the end of the day, even if you are revolutionary, even if you are a supporter of the revolution at the beginning, you can be killed, and you are not as radical as the other. And the revolution, in order to advance, it has to be more and more radical. It's the case with LGBT, for example. Look at them. You have people who are gay and who are now fighting against trans agenda because they saw that trans agenda is against what they fight in the beginning. It's the same for feminists. You have feminists who saw their allies defending trans people in prison, trans people in female bathroom, who are defending Islamic violence, things like that. So you have people from the left, from the liberals, who say, okay, I was in favor of some progress, I was in favor of some changes, and I was honest about it, but now I see that it's coming too fast, and it's going to destroy everything. So we now have the voice to show that. We can show that in the European Parliament, and we can go to some common sense liberal or even socialist and told them, okay, are you really in favor of fighting against meat consumption or fighting against the children? Like now we have green activists who say having children is bad, but most people have children. Most people want to have children. So we can go to these people and say, okay, are you really in favor of policy who are against the children, who are against family? Do you really think that you voters are in favor of that? Because at the end of the day, even if they are radical, they have to be elected. And if we show to them that if they support this green revolution until the end, they will lose voters. And that's why it's very important to fight against the new treaty, who will give more power to the bureaucrats. Because at the end of the day, even liberal politicians, even when they have terrible ideas, they are controlled by the people. They have to go back to the election and be re-elected. And we have control over them. But if we take this power and give it to the bureaucrats, these people have not elected. Nobody votes for Ursula von der Leyen. Nobody cares about her. And so if we give the power to this kind of people who are not elected, who will not go back to the voters, to the election, it will be a catastrophe because we will not have any influence on them. So yes, I think that's a way to fight against it.
That's a fantastic segue to a final remark I hope to get from Joe Grogan, who in his opening remarks talked about these the strange bedfellows of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Donald Trump. And it sounds very much like those kinds of alliances here in Europe may end up making a difference. So Joe, how can Europeans harness a bit of this, let's say, dissident left to get some common sense common ground on the insane green policies that are being proposed? How can they harness that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. When you think about the fact that a lot of us mentioned the elites. You know, the elites are the same everywhere. You go to dinner in Paris, the dinner's not going to be that much different than dinner in London. It's not going to be that much different than dinner in Beijing, you know, at the richest, most expensive restaurants. And the conversation is not going to be that much different at any of those places. But it's the cultural differences among the working and middle class that makes, frankly, travel so much fun, right? To meet real people with different views, different cultures, different backgrounds, but also a fair amount of commonality about the essential human elements. And I think that's what we need to get back to. I mean, ultimately, we have to appeal to faith and reason. We have to have faith in humanity and not in, not sit here and worship at the altar of the Green New Deal and not ask any more questions. I mean, what is your data? How much will the planet's temperature improve if you eliminate all these farms, if you kill all these cows, if you impoverish the people of Europe, if Europe has a demographic catastrophe, which it is on the verge of? Will the planet improve in any way, shape, or form? The answer is, of course, no. But this is about, ultimately, power and control among a small elite group whose lives do not markedly get any worse as a consequence of the policies which are impoverishing Europe. And I think first of all, conferences like this are important. We need more of these to recognize we are in the same fight against, frankly, superstition and darkness. We have to get back to what made Western civilization so important for the history of the world.
Thank you very much. And I think those are wonderful remarks to end on. I hope we've accomplished a bit of what Ordo, Iuris, and Heritage hope to do in this panel. I think these kinds of conversations are really essential, and we need to keep having them outside this room. Thank you very much.